I would say if you don't use it, then you will be out of business in 10 years.
So everyone?
I think everyone needs to use it because if you don't use it, your competitor will, and they will have a competitive advantage.
Yeah.
Hi, and welcome to Trend Talks, a podcast by Stendahls, a part of IO. So my name is Kai, and
I'm Kim.
And we are talking about the latest and the greatest within trends and technology. This episode, we're going to talk about the Metaverse and the industrial Metaverse. And we are having a guest, Fredrik Magnusson. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Who are you, Fredrik?
My name is Fredrik Magnusson. Been working within industrial companies in Gothenburg since more than 20 years, embarrassingly enough. And I've been working for a long period of time at SKF, and then been at Polestar, Volvo Cars, Volvo, Leissner Recycling, and a number of these kind of big companies.
So you've been at all big companies in Gothenburg?
Basically, all blue ones and one gray. Yeah.
All the blue ones and one green. That's cool.
Where are you currently?
Currently, I'm working for a scale-up company called Epicz Lab, focusing on industrial AI and transforming industrial companies to become more digital by using AI and digital twins.
That sounds really cool and actually very relevant for now. I mean, this is what's really happening. And how's the market interests? Is it hard to sell in to get the customers to understand, or is it a screaming demand?
I mean, sort of like it's the talk of the town in a way. Everyone is talking about it. I think everyone is trying to understand what it is. The approach we have is to make things extremely simple and really sort of easy to use. And that means that and also have a high level of recognition in sort of the tools that we put in place. So they've seen it before, and they feel that they can sort of immediately adopt to sort of the thinking. And when we present this, and we've been to fairs and we've been to sort of visiting a number of companies, it feels like they sort of get the grip of what we are trying to do quite quickly and feel that, okay, this is actually a spot where you can actually improve.
That's cool. And when you say AI and digital twins, is it like things, your products, are they either AI or digital twins, or are they connected to each other always?
What we are trying to do, what we are trying to become, I would say, is an AI-driven company. So we would like to have a foundation of data and AI. In a way, I don't like to talk about the technology as such, because there are so many other things that you need to put in place in order to get things working properly. But we would like to build at least on the technology and the modern technology and follow the trends when it comes to AI. And then we put tools in place to help the customers. I'm not really sure that I answered your question now.
That's okay.
Yeah.
But if we let's put it this way, so you are helping industrial companies, basically. And are you enabling these industrial companies to create new things, or are you more creating efficiency for the industrial companies?
We are creating tools and products which helps the customer to become more efficient, to become more effective, and be able to support them to do the digital transformation they have been trying to do. Because there's been a big we've been talking about digital transformation for many companies for 20 years now. Basically, my full work life, I've been working with digital transformations of a sort. Everything from engineering systems to commercial systems to customer products. And with the purpose to digitalize them, help the customer and also the internal company to be more digitalized. So what we have seen is that we combine this kind of knowledge we have and then put into products which the customer can use and then become more efficient.
All right.
So we are a product company in short.
And when you sell these products to the customers, I guess creating business cases is part of the selling process.
Yes, clear. Yeah.
Okay.
What kind of size of these industrial companies are we talking about?
I mean, the aim, we are approaching everyone. I mean, sort of we are a scale up. We cannot discriminate anyone depending on size because we need to just get customers, which all companies need to do, of course. But our primary target is to approach the industrial manufacturing companies. Primary target is Sweden, Europe, but obviously we're interested in global. We are looking at sizes from like small to mid-size to large, not extra large or extra large.
Yeah.
I mean, sort of like.
Right, so there is a cap.
And what we are trying to do is that we also, one part of our sort of company and our business model is that we are doing tech transfers. We are taking over technology that big companies has done, and then we move that down to small and medium companies by sort of re-engineering a little bit those technology and taking care of sort of the maintenance and development of those, the continuous development. So I mean, sort of, I would say that any size, but primarily the mid and large, and then primarily or only, I would say, industrial manufacturing companies, because we're focusing quite a lot on the industrial manufacturing part.
So a specific industry, more or less.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. So considering AI is a part of everything, at least that is what we found out at CES this year. Everyone wants to be AI powered or AI driven in some sense. So let's zoom in on the metaverse and let's start to understand what is the metaverse, because there are definitions around this. Yeah. So, Fredrik, in your words, what is metaverse?
It's a good question. I mean, sort of like, for me, it's a concept more than a solution. And I honestly, I would probably not be the best one trying to create a sort of like a crisp definition of what it is. But for me, it is very much what digitalization and digital twin, and I mean everything that has to do with sort of getting the digital world connecting to the physical world, and then get that interacting and sort of so it's the same thing. As I said before, we are focusing quite a lot on digital twin, and in many ways this is what I see as a metaverse, or at least a part of a metaverse.
I would say that was a very crisp definition. That's the only definition I know about. So but if that's definition of the metaverse per se, and then we're having the industrial metaverse, is it the same thing, or what's the difference here?
I mean, isn't that the same sort of asking like the world and the industrial world? What's the difference, and or is that the same thing? Yes, it's the same thing, and it's not the same thing. I mean, sort of the metaverse for me, it would be comparable to the world, and the industrial metaverse would be more comparable to the industrial world. Yeah. Then obviously there are a number of different sort of, in my head at least, what I see in front of myself is there's a number of differences in how, what kind of capabilities you put in place, like the interaction to machines, not necessarily needed for your home or something like that, if you sort of create that in metaverse. Or a shop, but I mean, sort of, it's more about the number of capabilities. But it's basically, so for me, industrial metaverse is a part of the metaverse, like the industrial world is a part of the world.
Right, but I think a lot of people think that the metaverse is when you put on those goggles, headsets, and stuff, and go into that virtual world. But I guess this kind of VR experience is not needed for the metaverse, right?
I mean, isn't that what it's being communicated around? I mean, sort of the use case around metaverse has primarily been into the VR world. Primarily, I mean, sort of not even the XR or the MR or AR or whatever you would like to call it. It's been more focusing on the VR and moving in and creating a separate world. And for me, I'm sort of like a really good application for a real metaverse. For me, it is basically an identical digital twin. That would be I wouldn't like to create a new world that is sort of like digital. of course we can do that and sort of create that which is totally separated from the real world or from the in reality. But if we can connect it together, then we got a much stronger use case and business case, because then sort of you get a digital representation of the physical world.
In one way, I mean, utilizing this as a visionary tool, you can create a dream world, some kind of utopia, and then you can strive there. I mean, you can experience it before you build it in the reality. For instance, the NEOM project in Saudi Arabia, nobody understands the potential and the vision around it. That super green that was supposed to host 5 million people, I think, in the beginning at least. That would be a super great case for Metaverse, I guess, because you can really see how life would be there, I guess. But it's still in utopia, and it will probably not be. It will probably be quite different from the initial plans and visions, I guess. So even though it's connected to the Metaverse world is connected to the physical worlds, at the same time, it does not need to be exactly the same world. It can be an extension of it or something different, I guess.
But I mean, sort of over time, wouldn't, if there is an extension of the real, I mean, now we come into the filosofiska timmen here, and I mean, sort of, if it is an extension of the real world or a sort of enhancement, isn't that then part of the real world as well? I mean, if it is connected, I mean, sort of, like your car, is that an extension of yourself? If you, and I mean, perhaps that was a super stupid example. I don't know.
I think it's,
but it's
imaginary kind of world experience.
Yeah, or like in Instagram, it's an extension of your marketing page of yourself in a way.
Yeah.
This is how you would like to be seen by others.
It's still real world. I mean, it's still experience as being perceived as an experience, and regardless if it's in this physical world or if it's in the digital world.
Yeah.
I think the example is very relevant because in my experience with the Metaverse, or at least the kind of VR experiences, it's just like watching a movie. You're immersing yourself with something else that's completely different from your normal life. So in a way, you're creating an imaginary world or an imaginary experience. So I think this is quite relevant, even from a practical perspective. It does not need to be that philosophical, but still, because I'm kind of trying to get the grip around the definitions by the Metaverse, because yes, you rather want to use this VR experience, kind of experience, to getting the immersiveness of the Metaverse, but at the same time there are Metaverse similar solutions like Minecraft and Roblox that the kids play, which in a way could be kind of Metaverse because they are in a separate world. It's
Connected.
kind of connected, and they are doing it together with other people and experience things together, interacting with each other without having these kind of VR experiences. So,
and in a way, you can say that both of these, Minecraft and Roblox, isn't that sort of like a digital version of Sandbox?
Yeah, exactly.
Where you meet other people and you build your imaginary world, and you do like what I did when I was a kid, sort of sitting in the sandbox, sort of having plastic cars, pushing them around and building small sand houses. This is obviously it's a little bit somewhat more advanced with the Minecraft perhaps, but it's but isn't it basically the same thing? Using your imagination and sort of just building some things.
And a few other quick definitions. Kim, what is the difference between VR, AR?
All of them?
XR? Yeah.
Well, VR, virtual reality, AR, augmented reality, MR, mixed reality, XR, extended reality, and there's probably more.
I think these four are the big ones. So what's the difference between them?
Well, augmented is something that's placed on top of the real world. So if you have like a glass or glasses on yourself, then you would display information onto the physical world. And virtual is what you talked about before. You have these big goggles and you immerse yourself in a virtual reality where you cannot see anything from the real world. And then you have mixed reality, which is using both the virtual world and the augmented world, essentially. Or at least that's my understanding of it. I'm not sure if you have any other definitions, Fredrik, but that's the way I interpret it. And then we have extended reality, which is essentially all of those combined. It's that we take our reality and we extend it to something. And if that's virtual, augmented, mixed, or whatever, then yeah.
And there's one factor added to the mixed reality, which means that the physical and the digital world can interact with each other. It's not just adding information; it's more like the interaction part of it. So, was it correct, Fredrik?
Yes, I think that was 100% correct. But also, so I like the sort of because in my head I also was thinking about XR or extended reality. Is this kind of when you have that you turn off and on things, like, I mean, I know we're going to talk a little bit about the Vision Pro later on, but I mean, sort of when you can turn off all of a sudden you can go into a VR world.
Yeah.
And then you change that context into an AR world instead, like 2 minutes later, and you still use the same sort of kind of technology. But
sorry.
No, I was just going to say what Apple did with the Vision Pro was kind of amazing when you go from watching a screen in augmented reality. So you're in this room or wherever you're at, and you have this screen in front of you, and you can make that screen go all the way up to essentially take away all the reality away from you, and you immerse yourself in that screen, and it takes over, and it becomes virtual reality. That's a very it was a very smooth way of doing that. So context switching between the physical world and the virtual world.
Yeah, and we were talking this lunch now with because in preparation for this I had a discussion with one of our designers, and we talked about exactly this with how you and we compared it with noise cancelling headphones.
Yeah.
Because it's basically the same thing. I mean, sort of, either you can go with the VR, then you turn on the noise cancelling, and then you focus on your sort of the sounds that you're sort of focusing on.
Exactly.
And then if you have the surrounding things, then you sort of turn that on, and then you hear everything around. And extended also. I mean, sort of as you do nowadays, to get extension of the sound.
Yeah, and it already works pretty well. Well, like if you're on a flight somewhere, you turn on the noise cancelling, and it's like you're in a different place. You get all the buzz goes away, and you're wherever you want to be mentally.
So let's go into the Vision Pro. They were launched. Apple's Vision Pro were launched in the beginning of this year, and it was a big hype before. Everyone was talking about them, or delivered in the beginning of this year, and they were launched last summer actually. But what it kind of failed commercially. What happened?
I don't know. If you ask me, I don't have a clue. I think it was not the cheapest thing that Apple ever have sold, I think. So that might have played something with it. But I mean, sort of I basically not seen it I've seen it in US a couple of times when I've been there, but I'm not seeing it in Sweden that much actually. So I don't know what happened. Probably production problem. I don't know.
Well, I think you could get them if you buy them. It's more like a mental thing in my understanding.
I guess people are waiting for stuff to happen. I mean, the ecosystem in terms of apps to use and the use case in general has to be there. And I don't think, considering the price point, as you mentioned, I don't think people see the value. And also, if I spend this money, I have to get some value for it. And if that price point is too high, in consideration to the value I get for it, then I'm not going to buy it. And I think that's perhaps exactly what happened. But that's just speculation from my part. I think that they will have to develop something more cheaper for the big mass, at least, to consider taking it on.
I mean, at the same time, they are extremely good. Extremely good. It's a built-in computer. I think it was M2, M3 semiconductor, and it's and you have the screen and everything. So if you take the price for buying like a MacBook Pro and add a screen to it, it's basically the same price. But you're getting so much more immersed in this one. And a friend of me who works here at the innovation department for a car factory, his screen broke down. He had this Vision Pro just for visionary purposes, and then his screen broke down, and he started to use this as his main computer. And he did it, and it was awesome. He could sit there for hours and just work. And it was better than using the screen because it could have so much more things going on.
But they're also lacking in terms of collaboration or collaboration ways. So right now, at least, or at least when I looked into it, you couldn't be in the same kind of space. Which means if all of us had one Vision Pro, we couldn't meet in the digital world or we could meet in the full virtual world, but we cannot meet in the augmented world, which kind of wasn't as good of an experience as you might like. So because all of them cannot track the same room the same way, meaning it will be very hard since it basically tracks your entire environment and replaces it, then that becomes very hard. And I think that's a very hard problem to solve in the augmented world. And yeah, I think that's also part of it, and that they're heavy. You said your friend used them for hours, but what I've heard is that they become very, heavy on your head to use over extended periods of time.
So they're too expensive and too heavy?
Well, I think that's an oversimplification, but yes, I do think price point is a big thing.
And then for years we had the cheap ones, the Meta, the Quests, and those, but they're too bad quality. Even they're affordable, but the quality is not good enough, right?
Sure.
I mean, I think that's isn't that the question that we need to ask ourselves? Why have not VR, AR taken off yet? Yeah. In general, I mean, I worked with this back at SKF when we did some kind of innovation things around this back in 2016 or something like that, and we used the HoloLens, and we tested a number of these kind of different sort of tools. But nothing happened after. I mean, we saw some small things that we could do, but it never took off. And even with gaming, I mean, kids or people is not gaming that much with VR. They prefer to play either on the phone or on the computer. Mm-hmm. And I think it's super interesting trying to understand why that is. What is it that we miss in having glasses on? Because it comes back to, I mean, would it be easier if we had normal glasses which had some AR, MR capabilities? Would that help? Potentially not. I mean, it's not clear that how would we stimulate our, why do we prefer to use a small phone? I mean, if you look at people now, I mean, it's interesting when you go by tram or whatever you do walking down the city, everyone is looking at this tiny screen continuously. And why is that? And why don't they use a bigger screen? And why don't you use a computer instead? Obviously, it's hard to walk around with the computer, but I mean, there is a preference of using the 2D world compared to the 3D. And the question is why? I don't know. I don't have an answer to that. But I mean, it's good. I think it's worth reflecting over at least.
Yeah. I think so too. But okay, so there are two scenarios in the future. One scenario is that the hardware will get good enough and cheap enough, so we can use it and utilize it. The other scenario is that we will not do it anyway because we actually deliberately prefer the 2D world.
Yeah, or the 2D version of the 3D. Oh, you understand what I mean? I mean, playing Minecraft on the computer. And by the way, I mean, the quality of any of the AR, VR, I guess it's good enough to play Minecraft, but still we don't do it.
No.
Yeah. That's actually interesting. And yeah.
But okay, so moving on to, you've seen the releases this year from both Meta and Snapchat with their AR kind of products.
Yes.
Have you tried them?
No.
No, I think it's very hard to do it. You need to be very, very specific. But what do you think? Will they ever be going to production? Is it just concepting now, or what do you think? Are they something?
I'm interesting to understand. I mean, as far as I understand, this is what that if you have swimming glasses on you, then you can get pace and projection on the swimming glasses now. Yeah. So you can see how many strokes you do and how your pulse and your a number of things. I've never tried that either. I know that he did also for Google's when you sort of were skiing, that you can see the altitude and you can see the sort of the temperature and the speed and things. But that has never taken off either. So I think there needs to be a practical use case which makes people sort of use it.
Yeah.
And the question what would that use case be? And I understand that I sound a bit negative now, but that's not sort of my purpose. It's more of that I cannot see that in front of me at this point. I would like to, and I would like to understand what would make these kind of things lift in reality.
I think that there is a bunch of use cases that would help us in various ways. Like one of them being that you could, if you have your glasses on, you could have a phone call. You can see the person you're talking to whilst looking ahead as well, which would be an improvement than looking downwards into a phone. You can get directions, so you could have directions being displayed directly onto roads, etc. In general, just analyzing objects around you, and depending on privacy stuff, you're analyzing people you meet. Obviously there is use cases, but
why would you? Why would you want to do that? I mean.
Well, again, I think that it comes. Well, then we go back to the use case. I don't think it's for all the time, 24/7. I do see it more of a specific use case. Like again, if you have a phone call, but why would you have your glasses on at all times if you just to answer your phone? Like that wouldn't make sense either. So there has to be multiple use cases where it becomes practical or handy or improve your life in to some extent. And what those areas might be, I don't know, but I think the technology enables it, and then it's up to developers to try and figure out what to do with it. In the same sense that App Store from the beginning was very, very slim. We didn't have much, but App Store evolved over time. We had games, we had all kinds of tools, we had, what it is today, and that it has been driven by, problems that people are trying to solve. And I think the same thing applies to augmented reality, VR, etc. as well.
I think it's kind of a technological thing. I mean, I was still stuck in those ski glasses, ski goggles, because I love skiing or snowboarding, and I would love to have some extra information. That would have been so cool, but I wouldn't want to pay more for it. So the thing is, why I think the iPhone really took off is because so much was included. You didn't need to pay those extra for each app, like Sony Ericsson and Nokia did before. You had to pay for everything, and that the car industry have done for years and years. You have to pay for extra stuff in the car in the kind of HMI. While in the Tesla, everything is included except the self-driving. And then when you kind of getting these goggles, it's just included with the screen and the information. It's the same price as normal, or at least almost the same price as normal glasses. And then you need technology that can actually support this. It has to be cheap enough and smooth to get, and no extra hassle with charging. You need to be able to keep them on for the full day. I think that's a breaking point. And then you will see so many applications.
Yeah, but also if we go back to the iPhone, and when Steve presented it, he made a big thing. Like one of the in the big presentation video he had, he showcased the exact thing you talked about. Like you have a phone, you have a camera, you have all these stuff, and then whoof, it goes into the iPhone. That was magic. That was something never been seen before. And I think that's the absolute biggest reason it kind of took off. But if we look at VR and AR, we already have these things. We have, like, it's not an extreme improvement. It is an improvement, I'm sure, for certain things, but it's not like we take 10 different products and put them into this new experience, I guess. Well, you could argue like it's movies and all kinds of stuff, but in general.
There is an analogy. I happens to drive the fantastic, beautiful Polestar 4 at the moment, which doesn't have a window looking back. It's a camera instead. And And I mean, sort of, I've been reflecting over. Partly, it's a little bit tricky because, sort of, for whatever reason, you need to talk to someone that knows things about the eye. It's hard for me to see, as I have glasses, and I see good on long distance, but bad in short distance. And when you look in the mirror, then sort of it's like long distance, so that works fine. But when you look at the TV screen, then it's sort of short distance. I don't know why it is like that, but it is sort of it. So this means that I need to, as this is progressive glasses, that I need to sort of look up in the roof in order to sort of see, which I take my eye away from the sort of the road, which makes it a little bit hard to use the screen with the mirror instead of a mirror. And the question is if it's similar to sort of like these kind of goggles, that it's sort of like hard to sort of experience something that is close to you at the same time as something that is far away.
Yeah, it gets kind of weird in a sense. The projection is on top of what? The glass, it's very close to your eye.
Or you put it further away and so on.
Yeah.
But then you also made me think another thing, which is a totally different thing from what I said now, and that is, but let's say that you would combine a number of the new technologies now. Let's say that you have a pair of Ray-Bans or whatever brand they sort of had for this kind of mixed reality XR glasses, which is good. Connecting that through wireless, obviously with 5G or G or 6G or something like that, to an AI that would understand sort of your natural language. And then at the same time have cameras that sort of that you can sort of record what you see, and then in real time translate when you sort of are at places that you get sort of more information. Basically, what you do with googling things. Mm. So instead of googling, you sort of could talk to the glasses, and then you get the information you need about the context what you're looking at the moment. That potentially could be sort of a good use case.
Yeah, I think so too, and I think that.
But then you need sort of that means much more like a lightweight LLM on the glasses because.
But I think that's what Mark Zuckerberg presented ish when he showed the new Meta glasses, because they, at least from a demo I was looking at, you could see or they did a YouTube demo video of it where you had these groceries basically on a table, and the glasses could identify what each of the different things was based on some kind of input and using LLM or whatever they used. But it was AI driven to use machine learning or something like that to recognize your world basically on what you saw, and based on that you could do stuff as well, like make a recipe of, okay, so if I have these ingredients, then what can I do with them? Well, here's a list of stuff you can do with said ingredients, and thus again building on these use cases. And so I think there are stuff if you're creative and if you just try to solve problems in general with this technology at hand.
Mm-hmm. Right, so let's move over to industrial metaverse and talk more about this specific topic, because at CES in the beginning of this year, Siemens had a keynote. So the CEO of Siemens showed their industrial metaverse as one of the biggest launches.
Vision for industrial metaverse, I think.
They all actually implemented it in a few solutions. For instance, they built the BMW car factory in the metaverse before they even started to dig in the ground. Yeah. So there were some really cool visions about this. And I was kind of surprised because I didn't really understand the impact. But when I saw it, I really started to understand the impact, that this must be one of the biggest things happening around the manufacturing industry and also design industry, where you can product design industry. Because in his example, it was not only creating factories, but also designing products, but also designing organs for humans, biological things.
It was essentially anything could be a digital twin, or it could have a digital twin. Doesn't really, since it resides within the digital world, anything could be created. It was his point, at least. But we're starting off with the factories and whatnot.
So let's boil it down a bit. So what kind of technologies? What's the core technologies and kind of infrastructures that are needed to go into this world and utilize it?
I mean, it's interesting with what you described for Siemens. I have not seen it, so I cannot sort of judge what it actually is. But I mean, sort of, I would assume that they sort of created a BMW factory in beforehand and then built it.
Yeah.
So basically, they created a real world twin of the digital version. Afterwards,
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
afterwards,
yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Like that.
That was basically what he.
Yeah, which is a little bit the chicken and the egg. Obviously, I mean, sort of what is starting, is it the digital twin that is the beginning, or is it the real world that is the beginning? But I mean, sort of like if you look at this, we are looking into this as well. We are not calling it metaverse. We are not calling it industrial metaverse or anything like that. We're calling it digital twin, just simply like that. And for us, a digital twin is a digital representation of the real world to largest possible extent. And I mean, sort of, it's a little bit not true that it's a digital twin, really, because it's not an identical twin, at least, because it's we are not at that point. We have not sort of everything connected, and we cannot sort of follow everything in real time in that way. But we are trying to sort of create that, at least sort of that it's easy for industrial companies to build a digital representation of their physical world, and then use that for a number of things. Just sort of like see like remotely how the factory is behaving, and see the production flows and things like that, but also simulate different alternatives, like see, okay, what happens if we are changing our factory setup or the production line in this way? What will happen then? How does it work for our workers? How does it work with the transport systems? How does it work for the airflow, or whatever it can be? And really sort of trying to use the digital world in creating simulation of the potential real world. And when we have come up with the sort of the best solution for that factory, then we can implement that in reality, and then it's much quicker. Because you can do so many more simulations and do so many more tests in a digital world than what you can do in the real world.
Yeah, that sounds like that's the most exciting thing about it. I think that it offers you so many possibilities of just testing stuff to be the most efficient a factory could be, or whatever could be, because you actually can test it out instead of going with the approach of here's what the architect did. They did it with experience, obviously, but it's still one version, and that we've got to build it. Now we can test everything from ventilation to electricity to efficiency from floor to whatever, and that's very I think it's super exciting.
Yeah, and also what we believe is that, I mean, many of the existing tools on the market today, because this is something that's been done for a long period of time, creating digital twins of things, is it so that it's somewhat difficult to get it sort of in place. You need to be an expert in order to create the digital world. Our thinking is that we turn that around a bit, that you don't need to be an expert using our system, but you will be an expert by using our system. And sort of helping companies to sort of take these steps. And that's part of the digitalization, of course, as well. And for me, I mean, so that would be one of the key capability of a metaverse, or an industrial metaverse, or a digital twin, is that it needs to be easy, like as easy as it can be. It should be as easy as the gaming industry, like Sims or whatever. Because you don't need to have like 4-year education or 5 years education on Chalmers, and like 15 days of training in a tool in order to create that. They play it after they are like young kids playing things, and they jump on it and they understand it immediately. And why should it be different for the industrial companies? It should be the same.
But okay, so let's say I have a small factory. Let's say I have a factory creating vinyls. And I want to try this in a kind of a small environment. How do I do it? Where do I start? What do I need to get in place in order to implement this kind of solutions?
You mean the digital representation of
Yes.
your vinyl factory? I mean, you don't need that much. You just need to send me an email, and then you get access to the system, and then off you go.
And
then you draw it. Yeah.
And then you kind of helping me to build up the factory like a digital twin. And then I can have basically access to it and see and do simulations and try things. Okay.
And then you sort of, I mean, what you would probably like to have is the mixture of plastic things that you put into on one side. You need to sort of, you would like to have an inventory of material, and you would like to see that the throughput in that factory. Now I'm not super good in this record printing business, but I mean, sort of, I guess there are a number of steps that you need to go through. That in order to make this happen, and then sort of you need to see sort of how you sort of, and you need to have a digital representation of your different machines that you have, and the packaging machines, and then the logistic flow out, and then sort of you work with that, and then you potentially can connect that. If you have sort of somewhat modern tools, then perhaps you can connect it and have sort of it sending up real-time data and as you're using it.
And can I also kind of experience it in the VR world, or is it? You
could do that. Of course, it's and we don't really have that capability. We have been exploring that capability, but I mean, it's sort of. But I think that's something you could do. The question is, again, coming back to the question we had before, what kind of information would you sort of get more in a VR? XR world compared to a computer. I mean, many people sort of are super happy with just sort of a simple text-based interface in order to get the information, because that's, for whatever reason, it seems that it's easier for us humans to sort of consume that sometimes.
And creating the digital twins, I mean, manufacturing process is one thing, but I guess you want to try to visualize it so it's kind of similar to the physical world.
Yep.
How do you create digital twins? Do you just photos and kind of stitch them together, or do you have a special kind of machine for it?
I mean, what we do, what most companies are doing as well as we are, is that you create in Sims world or in Minecraft or whatever. Obviously, a more high definition than sort of Minecraft, perhaps. So that's what you need to do. Then, obviously, I mean, sort of, it would be interesting to sort of create. I mean, let's say that you have a machine that is sort of like doing some. What do you do when you sort of do records? You sort of press things, correct?
Yeah, I think it's some kind of pressing, like a dough.
Yeah. So let's say that you have this kind of press machine that you press things together. Then if you just could take a photo of that and then sort of automatically generate a 3D model of that, would be sort of a fantastic sort of like capability, which I think it would not be so difficult actually. And I mean sort of there are of course digital models mostly of machines, but they are created in AutoCAD without any colors, so they become sort of like white. Which is a little bit ugly, and then you can use a photo to just sort of say, then the system would understand, okay, this is the colors that I need to use in order to, and this is where the color should be on which part and so on. So it would be good to create that automatic process somewhere, and perhaps it's already someone created that. We haven't seen it yet.
I think so. Yeah, and yes, we saw lots of like kind of digital twins creation, cameras, solutions, studios in different ways. You can walk into a booth and on a green screen, and they are creating your personal digital twin of yourself, and similar solutions. I think it's we are getting there, but maybe we're not there yet. But I mean, of course, it could be an even more streamlined process.
Yeah.
But I would love to challenge the kind of immersive VR kind of experience in this world, because I can imagine that, for instance, in this small venture as a vinyl pressing plant with maybe 10 employees, that kind of companies cannot afford to having a skilled process engineer, manufacturing process engineer. Consider sending or giving access to the factory and being able to put on the VR experience to a German super skilled process engineer from Munich who can actually walk into the factory and understand and directly consult with how to improve things just by getting the understanding how things experienced. And a small company might not be able to afford to bring them in and travel them in. So if just a few hours of support, that could be maybe a use case in this.
Yeah, potentially. I'm thinking that I'm thinking that an alternative to that could be an AI-driven support tool.
So we don't need the German engineer; we can do it with AI.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sure.
And also, you wouldn't really need a virtual world for it, right? No. Even if you have a digital screen, you could still, if you have an expert or whatever who is an engineer, he or she could look into the normal screen and just, come up with ideas on how to improve it.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Kai, for killing your use case there.
I'm trying to find grasp. but okay, okay, I understand this. But in architecture, it's kind of popular having this kind of VR environments you can experience the construction, but also in, I guess, in product design. In design, it's a thing because when you design things, you might want to hold it in your hand, and it's can be quite expensive or difficult to produce it. So maybe that's more of a relevant use case.
And I think that is clear that that the 3D modeling part is super important. And I mean, there are things that would be nice to see potentially on in an XR VR environment that could actually see you can get the different feeling if you can turn things around a bit, and that you can see how pipes and cabling in a factory or in somewhere, how that would look like, or in different lights, or for a car, for example, or for the design of a house, perhaps, would be interesting as well. I mean, I was looking at something when you buy apartments nowadays. When they are newly constructed, you can walk around in that apartment, and that's like an interesting experience as well. Obviously on a computer still, but that really helps you understand. And you can look out and you can move outside and look in and see how you would see the city and so on.
And simulates the sun going in which direction and all of that. And also, when you mentioned vehicles, I was thinking you've oftentimes seen these clay models of the car. Would that be something that could have a digital twin where you simulate everything as well? But the reason I'm asking is I'm thinking, AR and actually being in the same room as essentially the car, not skipping the step of having a clay model. Instead, just build a digital twin virtually represented in front of you, where you can see all the scale. Of course, you cannot touch it, but you can see it, and you can get the sense/feel of it. Would that be a future possible?
I think you need to talk to Thomas Ingela and ask him what he thinks about this. But I mean, I cannot really judge. I would assume that there are already 3D models, and they're doing quite a lot of these things. And if I recall correctly, what they actually are doing now is they're crashing cars digitally instead of
for simulations
instead of running 10 to 50 cars into a wall. They do it digitally, and they can do so much more, which is obviously a good thing.
All right, so so I'm convinced. I want to have this kind of simulation digital twin. Are there any industries, manufacturing industries, that would never be they would never be using this? Makes no sense. Or are there any kind of extra fast adopters, and specific industries that are more relevant than others?
I would say if you don't use it, then you will be out of business in 10 years.
So everyone?
I think everyone needs to use it because if you don't use it, your competitor will, and they will have a competitive advantage.
Yeah.
The same thing with AI and the things around sort of AI, both digital twins and AI, for me goes hand in hand. If you don't do it, then you will be out of business because there will be someone else doing that and they will be 10 times as productive.
Yeah, I get that.
And how do you include AI in let's say, at least your products? How do you work with AI and what value does it bring?
We are trying to be, as I said a little bit in the beginning, AI native. So we sort of come from an AI foundation. So we try to use it for anything. At the moment, we have created sort of like a super simple solution where you sort of interact like ChatGPT, but towards a context which is very specific towards a machine.
Yeah.
And you can ask the machine or ask sort of that, have the interaction directly to the knowledge around that machine and get feedback, get the information back directly. Instead of reading like 500 pages of handbooks, which is far away in an office, you can sort of get it directly when you are at the machine.
Yeah.
Obviously then supporting multiple number of languages without any need for sending them to translation agencies and so on, which is a super efficient way of sort of doing that. So that's one part that we definitely do that, and then we're looking into sort of how we will also drive sort of putting agents in place, which is sort of like super important. I hope you have a podcast about agents very soon as well.
Yep.
Which I think is the key for the future, which will be very, very sort of that there will be, I heard this morning now, there will be more agents than, by the end of this year.
Which is crazy.
Not this year, by end of next year. Which is amazing.
Yeah.
Sounds a little bit like Matrix, but I mean sort of with agents running around. But I mean, I think this is a good thing as well.
Yeah.
So, and there you have this kind of learning cycle as well. So you need to learn the agent to become better as time goes.
So so let's say we implement this solution and we have agents and it's kind of making a super efficient manufacturing process, and then the internet goes down. How would that?
I mean, sort of, is that any different from today? Basically, it's what happens if internet goes down.
You're ish screwed unless you do it
sort
locally.
of like, or electricity goes down. Obviously, there is no people then making these decisions. But I mean, sort of at the same time, I don't think that any modern machine or any modern manufacturing company would sort of be able to work in isolation from internet or internet with sort of like this kind of science around it, because I mean sort of intranet or network. I think we talk networking because I mean sort of you can have like machines locally, but if the network goes down, then the network is down, and then you will be in the dark.
You would. So this could become a prioritized target for cyber threats. How could we be secure from this?
Now we jump down that rabbit hole. I'm sort of like it's very, very important to take cybersecurity serious, of course. I think that you need to consider that, and you need to sort of put things in place in order to have this working, because you need to protect you from threat. Is this a bigger threat than what already existing? Potentially, or potentially not. I think that there is, in general, there is a sort of like, it's more for me. I mean, sort of, and I'm wrong in this, but I feel sometimes that new technology often gets sort of punished by cybersecurity threat rather than old solutions, even though that the threat is equally big.
Yeah.
It's more like that people are afraid of new technology rather than that is a bigger threat.
Yeah.
But all of them, independent of what it is, it needs to be taken seriously, and you need to sort of course, safeguard that you are protected in the right way. And I mean, obviously, we are doing that as well as you are at Stendahls or any other company is doing.
But also I think that the more technology evolves, the more data goes into it, the more like that becomes more of a threat potentially, since we now have nodes of data that are extremely much bigger, since we're connecting more stuff to it. In terms of it could be privacy, of course, as well. But let's say you have business sensitive stuff. If you put sensors on everything just to keep it update in real time, and you measure everything and you collect it locally or whatever, but somehow being able to trace it, that kind of exposes you to potentially bigger risk, because the reward of getting hands on that type of information would be much larger than if that data wouldn't exist within some cloud somewhere. So I think it kind of goes hand in hand with what value you have there. That would be the exposed risk would be higher if the value you can potentially get by hacking into something is bigger. So if I can get hands of all your money, that is more valuable to me than knowing what size you have in shoes. So obviously that matters as well.
Yeah.
And as technology progresses, more data goes into it, and data is valuable in terms of ideas or building upon.
I think the biggest threat company has is bad user experience of applications.
Yep.
Which sort of makes people do shortcuts in order to sort of make their life easier. And that I think is a big threat.
Yep, I agree.
And that applies to many other areas than just the manufacturing process.
That's applied to everything.
Yeah,
From just sort of, if you have like 15 letters passwords that you need to remember, obviously type it up somewhere.
Exactly.
And either under your computer or in a post-it beside your screen or in an applications on your computer, sort of, or your phone.
So are there any kind of regulatory or legal considerations working with these digital twins and industrial metaverse solutions? What do we need to be aware of?
It's a small question.
Another rabbit hole.
Exactly. I guess we need to ask ChatGPT about that and see what kind of ones you get. Of course, there are legal and things that needs to be considered. I wouldn't like to sort of jump into that because I'm too weak in that area, I would say.
Right. I mean,
what's your thinking? Sort of, do you see anything that sort of actually will sort of have legal implications, or from what you've seen? So
I'm
far?
not that worried, to be honest. Not in this case. I mean, in AI in general, yes, of course. But not in the world of digital twins, other than if it's kind of supervising or monitoring people due to integrity, especially in more sensitive countries. I mean, in Sweden, for instance, we're much more sensitive than other countries about the integrity of the worker. So maybe these kinds of consequences. But if it's not like really monitoring the human, the person, the operator working there, maybe it's not that tough. I don't know. I'm just reasoning now. What's?
Yeah, and I'm sort of, one reflection is that, I mean, sort of, you can look at, in many ways, there is a race now ongoing when it comes to digitalization and when it comes to productivity and efficiency of factories and manufacturing and companies in general. And the one that are leading those races now, I think is clear. It's China. It is US, especially West Coast US, but US in general. And if we look at the legislations that they have around these things, and compare that with EU and the legislations we have in EU around these things, the question is, where would we like to be? Would we like to be the follower, and then hopefully sort of competing on sort of half-decent terms, or would we like to be the leader?
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of like a question we need to ask ourselves. Yes, of course, there is a number of legislations that we need to follow, and we should, of course, not track people like in the old days. But the question is what we would like to be as EU or Sweden compared to China, US.
But challenges are also
because it's interesting because you went to CES, which is obviously US, and the most of the companies you saw there was either Chinese and American. Yeah,
sure.
And obviously Siemens you saw because that's what we just talked about, but that's a European company, of course. But it's
we talked about it when we were there. There were probably more Asian people than kind of American and European people there. But anyway, I mean, it's quite clear and obvious that Europe is not a leader in AI and other like kind of technologies, and we are having challenges in Europe to keep up the pace now, and we are kind of dependent on American companies. So we are in a kind of tougher situation at the same time as we are pretty good in manufacturing. We've been very, very good and efficient in manufacturing for quite some time when it comes to quality.
But not anymore.
Not anymore. I mean, other countries can be also quite efficient in this.
Or better.
Or better. But if we can utilize these kind of technologies, we can, be in par. Mm-hmm. Meaning that we need to do it. Meaning that we need to have legislations that allow us to do it. But now comes opportunity. And for instance, if the worker integrity is a big thing, then we could anonymize it. So you just have worker A, B, C, D, and E. And then the worker could have access to their own kind of potential upskilling or data and make their own conclusions. But the supervisor manager does not, for instance. That could be kind of a new way of doing things in order to adapt to more sensitive countries.
Yeah, and I think that the legislator need to reflect a bit, and the governments need to reflect a bit. Okay, where would we like to position ourselves moving forward, comparing us to others? And so perhaps it's good enough to be laggers into this race, or I don't think so. But and so it's clear if you sort of read the messages from Vinnova now. Which is interesting because they are sort of pushing this. European Union is starting to get their eyes on this as well, as far as I understand, at least from where I'm sitting and seeing this. So, and there is a lot of venture capital going into, or not venture capital, but government capital into trying to sort of be competing on same level. And I think it sort of comes not only to AI, but it's also digitalization and sort of adapting digitalization. We need to speed up in Europe, clearly.
So when it comes to the industrial metaverse and the digital twins, what's your vision? What will happen? How would things evolve? What are you looking forward to in the future, in a couple of years ahead from now?
When we look at industrial companies around Europe and in Sweden and actually globally, we see that there is more people retiring than there is possibility to fill up with new people. So we are on a track where we will lose more and more operators, skilled manufacturing people. So we need to sort of come up with new processes, new tools in order to support companies doing that. So I think that within like a couple of years, you will see that the companies that has not sort of jumped onto this race will not be able to compete because they will not have the capabilities and they will not have the resources. So it's a tough race now or a tough sort of situation for many companies to sort of adjust to this. And there is this kind of scareness of it as well, because it's a little bit scary to do something which you don't know, and you sort of sometimes overthink and sort of spend too much on doing an analysis around sort of how to implement this and how you can get business cases out of it. And I think you need to sort of just dare to do things. Start small, take next step. So when it comes to the digital twin and AI and industrial metaverse, I think that will be a natural part of all efficient and companies that are competing on sort of on high level need to have that in place.
Any special kind of product or solution that we cannot really see now, but that you are kind of seeing, or
Agents.
Agents.
I think that's sort of key. I think that AGI will come much quicker than we think.
Is AGI really a thing? More and more people are saying that it's less relevant now, because when kind of the AI passed the Turing test, which it did earlier this year, they say that's more or less a breaking point, and so the AGI, it's not really relevant definition, or what?
I think it is, in order to. I think because it's like, yes, the first step in sort of becoming sort of smart AIs. Obviously, we have passed, and then we need to continuously evolve that, so we become smarter and smarter. And so I think that's sort of I believe strongly in that ADI is a thing, and it will be bigger than internet when it sort of hits us within 2 years.
In 2 years, that's your prediction. That's interesting. It's going to be interesting to see.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
it's a fun time to be alive.
Yeah, it is.
I'm sort of coming from. I'm lucky that I've sort of started working before internet.
Yeah.
I mean, sort of like, and then seeing the internet boom back in the end of 90s, beginning 2000, and then see the change that this has sort of. We are super lucky to be living in this time, because it's been so many things happening, especially as we are working in digital things. It's sort of fantastic.
It is fantastic.
Do you think also, like in terms of digital twins, will we see that evolve into other business areas as well?
Yes, I think that it will be a natural part of all businesses.
Yeah, over time.
More and more, like, I mean, independent wherever it is, it's sort of like having a digital representation of the physical world is the key. Because you can do so much more when you start to have that.
Are there any other non-manufacturing industries that could be, I mean, elderly care or kindergartens, or?
Yes.
How would they do it? Sorry.
I mean, sort of like, I would guess that like hospitals and the medical, sort of the hospital their processes potentially could be improved somewhat.
They could.
We saw that during CES as well, where they had, again, some kind of glasses on, and they could essentially, when operating, they could overlay everything that was on the inside, and thus seeing a bunch of stuff, and the technology could be potentially anything. If you're talking about kindergarten, you could see moods, you could interpret, you could analyze. If we have AI there, I guess there's a lot of stuff.
Do you really want to have an AI monitoring your kids at the kindergarten to see their moods?
Yeah, hopefully that you could see if they're happy or not anyway. But again, you could measure stuff like we saw with the magic mirror by Anora, where you could basically look into a mirror and it could tell your vital signs. It could tell if you had redness, soreness, whatever. It could look into your eyes, see if you had certain issues or problems. If there is any type of yellow, whatever it could be. It could analyze and measure and just give you a clue if this is something you need to look into. And that's already existing. So again, 2 years from now, we're talking about AGI, or we're talking about AI in general evolving even more, and we have agents for everything. Then sure, I think, it's going to be a different world.
Yeah. So where will this end up, Fredrik? Will we just become zombies in the future, and AIs and agents and just taking care of everything?
I don't think we'll become zombies. I hope, for a number of reasons. I mean, I think it's evolution. We will always come up with some things. I mean, sort of, human race will not, short term at least, disappear, and we will probably have a lot of things to do. Exactly what it is, I don't know. But I think that the world will become better and better. I'm sort of super optimistic about the future.
I love that. I mean, the world has changed before, and for each change, I think we could always have been quite optimistic. Problems tend to sort out themselves.
Yeah, and historically we have been getting better and better. If we look at the bigger picture in terms of like humanity, everybody's getting better. So yeah.
All right, it was great to have you here, Fredrik. Before you leave, what have we learned today? Just a few quick words of reflection. Have you learned anything today, Fredrik?
I learned a bit about Metaverse and a bit about XR, AR a little bit more. It was really fantastic talking to you about this. A number of questions that I at least will bring with me home is sort of reflecting around the use cases, how this can be applied for the future, how we can sort of optimize this, what other businesses could sort of use these kind of technologies. I think it's been a really good conversation.
Great.
And Kim, what have you learned today?
Yeah, I would say the same. And I think the use case thing is, when we discussed it, I think that's the key. Like if we find more use cases, we find more ways of solving problems that, you get a better life for, or it makes your life easier to some extent. That's the key. That's what we need to look into.
Thank you, Kim. And I learned that it's not that the 2D world is relevant as well, that we as humans can prioritize it.
It's not just glasses. And
exactly. It's not just 3D world and glasses, because I've been quite programmed that in a few years we will have these AR and VR headsets and stuff like that, but maybe not, actually.
Yeah.
So we'll see. So thank you very much, Fredrik. It was great to have you here. And thank you, Kim. And stay tuned, everyone else, for the next episode, which we will present in a little time.